This is a 2007 Subaru Outback station wagon, seen from the back. I recently purchased this vehicle and found that it had a number of electrical problems involving the rear liftgate. The windshield wiper motor didn't work. The radio got very poor reception, suggesting a problem with the antenna, which is embedded in the rear windshield. Some of the lights in the back didn't work, and this led to some troubleshooting to figure out what the problem was. With the liftgate elevated, we can see wiring harnesses. One on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. Each one of these carries a collection of wires. The one on the passenger side carries a lot more wires, but there are a few over here as well, including the one to the radio antenna. You can pull these grommets loose and expose the wires inside, and what I discovered was there was only one bad wire on this side, and on the opposite side, in this wiring harness, I found 4 broken wires, and most of the other wires showed dry rotting and cracking. On this side, I isolated that one broken wire and I spliced it together, resoldering it and putting heat shrink on it, and that restored radio reception. On this side, because there were so many broken wires, I decided just to replace the entire wiring harness. The wiring harness to the liftgate starts right about here with 2 big plugs connecting it to the rear car wiring harness. Okay, and then there's a big cable running up here, and then it crosses this conduit. Then it supplies many things here in the liftgate. You have to remove all that trim in order to expose that wiring harness. And then it has a branch that runs underneath the roof trim, and it supplies the dome light right here. So you end up having to remove all the trim from the liftgate, all the trim from the passenger side rear quarter, and you have to remove other things in order to get this, to get the roof trim down enough to where you can work on it. Now, I didn't want to remove this whole the entire roof trim. That would have been a very big job. With the passenger side rear quarter trim removed, which included the quarter pillars, both front and rear, that freed up much of the roof trim. So on the driver's side, I also removed the quarter pillars, front and rear, and that freed it up even more. In addition, I removed the lift handles, the rear seat lift handles on both sides. And with all that removed, I was able to drop this down enough to where I could work on the wiring harness up here. I made a separate video on how to remove and reinstall the liftgate trim, and a separate video on how to remove the passenger side rear quarter trim. It is possible somebody might want to remove these trim pieces for other reasons. Also, putting it all in one video would have made a very long video. Now, I have already replaced the rear wiring harness, and I made this section of video afterwards and put it at the beginning, so you'd have some idea of what you were in for. It's a pretty involved job. So if you are removing the wiring harness to the liftgate, I suggest watching the videos on how to remove the liftgate trim and the rear quarter panel trim first. Now, why do we have so many problems with the liftgate wiring harness? Every time the liftgate is opened and closed, these cables flex, flexing over and over again. This is a very common problem with this car. If you are one of the many people who needs to replace your wiring harness, then this video is for you. We will now demonstrate how to remove and replace the liftgate wiring harness. I've gone ahead and raised the liftgate. Now I have removed most of the trim to expose the wiring. On the driver's side, we have this conduit here from the main body of the car into the liftgate. And this conducts the electrical wires from the body to the liftgate. And then you can see those wires continue on in this direction. And one of the things that it supplies is this device here, which is the amplifier for the antenna. On the passenger side, again, we have a similar setup here. Another conduit carrying numerous wires, including the wires to the windshield wiper motor and the rear door latch and the lights. There's a lot more wires on this side than the other side. There's about a dozen wires in here. If you peel back these grommets, you can kind of expose the wires. Peeling back the grommet on this side, I can count actually 4 individual broken wires. So that explains a lot of the problems we're having. I'll try to illuminate that a little bit better. Like there's a broken one right there. There's another one right there, and there's a couple more back in there. 4 broken wires. The other wires, even if they're not broken, they're sort of dry rotted and cracked and ready to break. Replace the entire wiring harness. At this point, we have the entire liftgate with the trim removed and the wiring harness exposed. We also have the driver's side rear quarter trim removed or loosened and the wiring exposed here as well. Now what is left is the wiring beneath the ceiling trim. Now that is going to go to this light here and also a grounding wire. Now we have things partially removed with all of this trim removed on the passenger side. We can partially loosen the roof trim and we can actually see the wiring in there. But we need to get this thing looser. I'm going to try to loosen it up enough to where I can work on the wiring without having to pull down the entire roof, because that's a lot of work. A lot of stuff has to come off in order to get the roof off completely. Let's see if I can't get just enough things to where I can open this up enough to where I can work on the wiring harness. Then we're going to go ahead and remove this rear quarter pillar trim. And this one you just have to sort of just pry on it and tug on it just like on the other side. Now on this roof section, after removing this pillar, I've now got a little bit more room, and there are 3 clips, 1, 2, and 3, which I was able to pop down. Also, there's this separate piece of plastic here, which is held on by these little guys. And I went ahead and removed those. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do or not, but I'm trying to get enough room to work here without pulling down everything. So I'm going to see if I can get that room by simply pulling this one strip off. I've loosened up everything here, and let's see what we got. Got that piece. I hope I can get that back on again. Okay, now let's have a look. I can actually touch the wires. I still don't quite have. Maybe I can get them from. There's the ground wire. I can feel that, and there's a big screw on it. In order to try to free up the roof a little bit more, we're going to remove what they call the lift assist handles. There are little covers here covering screws on either side. We have to remove these little caps to get at those screws. Okay, we got those little caps off. We've exposed the two screws, and we will now remove those screws. Now I've got those two screws removed. You pull out, this side comes out, and this side you turn counterclockwise, and then boom. Okay, there it goes. Excellent. Now we're going to remove the armrest shoulder and forward quarter pillar cover. Hopefully maybe we can get a little bit more movement out of that roof. Maybe give us enough room to work. So we're going to remove this. We're going to remove this backrest shoulder from the driver's side rear seat. Now, of course, we already have the seat cushion out of the way, thus exposing this 12mm nut. Now we can just sort of pull this guy and lift it. And on the top side, we'll see if we can't pop that loose. Okay, we'll lift that up. And pull it away. Still attached to the seat belt. Now we can work on this post. Okay, just like on the other side, we've got this little cover right here that has to come off to expose that 10mm bolt. And there's our bolt. Just like on the passenger side, the driver's side quarter front pillar trim has got a clip here and a clip here. And we will remove those with our clip removal tool. One and two. And with those loosened up, we can just now pull off the entire trim piece. Roof is slightly looser. Let's see what that gets us. With front and rear quarter pillar trims removed on both sides, we've now been able to lower the roof trim even further. Now it turns out there's some clips even deeper. And if we reach in, we can release some of these clips further in. I'm using gloves because there's some fiberglass, I believe, in here. There. Now we've got a lot more room to work. We're going to remove what Subaru calls the cargo room light. This thing here, all you got to do is just sort of pop it out, just maybe with a screwdriver. I've gone ahead and loosened it up with a screwdriver. You can drop that down. Okay. We can now see that wiring harness a bit better. We see that branch of the wiring harness coming across this way. And then there's a ground wire with a lug right here, and that lug is held in with a Phillips head screw. And then this wire continues on behind all of this metal, and then it emerges here, supplying the dome light. I'm removing that lug screw with a Phillips head screwdriver. I now have enough room to work. Okay, we now have that lug free. And I've gone ahead and disconnected the luggage room light from the connector. There are 3 clips, one here, 2 holding on this cable behind the metal, back in here, kind of hard to reach. If we follow this cable back, you can feel a clip right there. You can't really see it, but you can feel it. I'm going to try to pry that off sort of blind. Okay, we got that clip. Kind of messed it up a little bit. I don't know what you can do. Okay. And the last clip, you can actually see, there's that last clip right there. Okay, after some struggling, I managed to pop off that last one, or what Subaru calls the luggage room light. And here's our ground lug. Follow it right back to here. Okay. Very good. So this section is now free. Well, we have gotten the wiring harness finally, and it's really quite complete. It comes complete with all of the various clips and everything already installed, and that's good. I'm going to take one good long careful look, so in case I need to refer back to something, because once I pull it out I might have trouble remembering where things went. And that's pretty much the length of the thing right there. I'm going to go ahead and pull out this part of the wiring harness, which, supplies the light to the dome light in the back. We'll get that out of the way, that way we can, and then we'll go ahead and disconnect these connectors, down here. They connect it to the car. Okay, I've disconnected these 2 cables from here. Okay, Got it so far. Now there's a couple. There's several clips in here, and there's one more up in here. See if I can get that off. Okay. It's unfortunately intertwined with this other cable. In here, that's going to take a little unraveling. Okay, now here's the part of the cable that goes into the roof, and here's the part of the cable that goes behind the the passenger side left trim, which connects to the body of the car. Now we should be able to pull all that right through here. Okay, all that is out now. Now with this part out, I have all the rest of this very complex wire supplying the lift gate. I'm going to attempt to feed the new wiring harness through these holes with the old wire still in place. I may not have enough room, but at least this way I can then, it'll be a lot easier figuring out where each one of these things plugs into with the old wire still in place. I'll see if I can do that. Maybe I can't. I'm wrapping some of these connectors in tape to hold them together so that they don't spread out as they slide through this channel here. Let's see how much further we can get this thing. So what I'm doing now is I'm just following the course of the original wiring harness and just replacing the old plugs with new plugs all the way around. Okay, so far, here's the new wiring harness. Here's the old one. I just sort of laid in there to help me lay all these things out. And here's the new one. You know, to the tail light, to the rear window heater, to the, I believe the lights to the license plate, and to the latch to the door, and the windshield wiper motor. And we have this little bit left. As you can see, I mean, by having them both in there at the same time, it made it a lot easier figuring out where all these plugs went. And we'll finish up with these. Okay, I've got everything plugged in with the new wiring harness, tail lights, latch, windshield wiper motor, windshield heater, other tail light. Well, everything's plugged in now by simply following the old cable, which has been unplugged. Now the next trick is to see if I can pull the old cable through this hole and out. We still have this one branch that runs to the upper part of the door, 10mm bolt and one connector. Okay, I've disconnected this cable now. Now the trick is to see if I can pull it all through this hole and then this hole and get this whole old wiring harness out. All right, old wiring harness completely out, new wiring harness in. We can then reconnect. We can now do the upper part here. And grounding lug. Now that we have this part threaded through, this entire portion of the liftgate part of the wiring harness, we now have these other two parts, the one connecting to the car and the one connecting to the roof light. They both have to be now threaded through here. We have now fed those two cables back into the body of the car. We will now reconnect these cables. Okay, I've popped those two into place. And now for the roof segment. Okay, the new wiring harness is completely hooked up. Here's the ground wire here. This is the roof section. Here's the part going to the dome light. Dome light itself isn't quite hooked up yet, but we're now reconnected to the main wiring harness of the car, and all the rest of this is now reconnected. Excellent. And now all we need to do is put all the trim back on. We had removed the very back portion of the roof trim a while back. This piece right here. Now I'm not sure we were supposed to remove that, but I'm going to try to get that back on again. Now it goes on like this. But by removing it, it gave us a lot more room to work. I'm going to try to see if I can't coax that back on again. Little hooks on the end here that have to kind of latch under like this. And then you've got these seven little posts that have to go into these little indentations here. And then you got these little lips that have to go over. This is going to be difficult to coordinate all this at once. And all these little posts here that have to go into all of these little indentations. And three of them have to go through a second hole. Let's see if we can get this to all work at once. Okay, it looks like it's in place. Looks like I got everything in place there. Now we see those seven little posts. And we have these seven metal discs that hold them in place. So we have to pop those on each one of those little posts. Alrighty. Let's pop it on. Now I've gone ahead and put all those little metal discs back on. Thus holding this piece firmly in place. I've gone ahead and reattached the two lift handles, the back seat lift handles, right and left. Before you tighten down the screws on those lift handles, be sure to line up the trim with the weather stripping properly. You can get it lipped over or lipped too high. Once you tighten down those screws, it's hard to adjust this thing. You know, we put our little caps back on as well. Okay, we pop them on. Good. We just do the same thing on the other side. We are looking straight up at the ceiling. There are a number of clips here that were popped loose, and we have to push this thing up and see if we can't re-engage all of these little, there we go. We need to re-engage all of these clips. Okay, we got the ones in the back. Let's see if we can't. There we go. That looks good. Okay, all those little clips have been popped, and the roof is now all back up again. Now I can push this guy in place. And looking straight up, we can now attach, let's get that cable in there right. We can now attach, put in place our rear, what they call the luggage room dome light. Good. Next, we shall put on this front pillar trim. This piece. Now, you might remember we got a 10mm bolt there. We got that clip which has got to go in here. And we got a clip here and a clip here. It's a matter of pushing things in. And then this little clip, which probably has fallen out someplace along the line, just got to pop it back in. All right, good. And then we pop on our little cover. Now once this piece is in place, we can now put back on armrest shoulder piece. Okay, and now we have that piece kind of in place. Give this piece a thunk, you know, to get that clip to catch. Time for our 12mm. And there we go. The front pillar trim and backrest shoulder on the driver's side is now reinstalled. We now have the rear column trim to be put on, and again, you know, we just got these three clips you got to match up, and the thing just pushes right on. I think that's got it. All of the trim has now been reinstalled on both the driver's side and the passenger side, and the lift gate. Now, this video covered the removal of the front and rear quarter pillar trim. However, on the passenger side, all of the quarter trim was covered in a separate video. So, as mentioned earlier, you really should watch that video before you watch this one. In addition, the removal and reinstallation of the liftgate trim is also covered in a separate video. The wiring harness to the liftgate was completely replaced, and all of the electrical functions of the liftgate have now been restored and are functioning normally. Now you can see from this video, replacing the wiring harness is a pretty big job. If you only have one or two broken wires, you might consider repairing just those one or two wires in place